The United States does not recognize Nicolas Maduro or his cronies.
Colleagues, the illegal U.S. blockade on the coast of Venezuela is the most clear and absolutely real act of aggression.
China opposes all acts of unilateralism and bullying and supports all countries in defending their sovereignty and national dignity.
Let me begin by stating and reiterating the United States does not recognize Nicolas Maduro or his cronies as the legitimate government of Venezuela. Nicolas Maduro is a fugitive from American justice and the head of the foreign terrorist organization Cartel de los Soles. In fact, Maduro and his regime stole the election, and the international community has the receipts. President Trump has been very clear that he is going to use the full power of the United States of America, the full might of the United States, to take on and eradicate these drug cartels which have operated with impunity in our hemisphere for far too long, and everyone knows it. The single most serious threat to this hemisphere, our very own neighborhood, and the United States is from transnational terrorist and criminal groups. These cartels are not like the mafia. These cartels are sophisticated, very technically capable, well-financed, and are wreaking havoc in our region. In its own 2025 World Drug Report, the UN Office on Drugs and Crime identified Venezuela as the key trafficking route in the entire Western Hemisphere for illegal drugs and for illegal narcotics and materials entering the United States and increasingly Europe. The United States will impose and enforce sanctions to the maximum extent to deprive Maduro of the resources he uses to fund Cartel de los Soles, which the United States has designated as a foreign terrorist organization along with Tren de Aragua. Important to this council meeting today, this includes profits from the sale of oil used to finance these cartels. The reality of the situation is that sanctioned oil tankers operate as the primary economic lifeline for Maduro and his illegitimate regime. The sanctioned tankers also fund the narco-terrorist group Cartel de los Soles. Maduro is responsible for trafficking, using these resources and using these profits into both the United States and Europe. And one has to ask, why have sanctions, either bilaterally, unilaterally, or backed by the international community, if they're not enforced? Well, the United States under President Trump is enforcing them in international waters. Otherwise, they are just empty words. Further, not only does Maduro's illegitimate regime openly cooperate and fund terrorist and criminal organizations, but it invites terrorist groups like Hezbollah, like the Iranian regime, militias like the ELN and FARC dissidents to operate openly within their territory, unimpeded and unencumbered. Maduro's ability to sell Venezuela's oil enables his fraudulent claim to power and his narco-terrorist activities.
For several months now, the entire world has had the opportunity to observe the way that the United States has been continuing to deliberately foment tensions around the friendly nation of Venezuela under the pretext of combating drug trafficking and the terrorist threat. illegally destroying at the same time the civilian vessels in the Caribbean Sea. We, during the previous Security Council meeting, we all had an opportunity to see the fact that this artificial smoke screen is concealing the goal of U.S. military groups being shored up and the delivery of exerting tension on an independent state whose policy is not to the liking of Washington. It seems that the White House decided to remove from the mothballs the previously embraced practice of portraying combating terrorism as justification for blatant aggression and intervention in the affairs of sovereign states. And this time, the so-called foreign terrorist organization has been labeled as being the legitimate government of the Bolivarian Republic. Colleagues, the illegal U.S. blockade on the coast of Venezuela is the most clear and absolutely real act of aggression. And the responsibility of Washington is also evident for the catastrophic consequences of such cowboy-like conduct for the residents of the country, which is now blockaded. Unfortunately, we have every reason to believe that these are not one-off acts by the U.S. vis-a-vis Venezuela. This intervention, which is unfolding, can become a template for future acts of force against Latin American states in accordance with the so-called Trump corollary and the Monroe Doctrine, which was enshrined in the recently published U.S. national security policy. And this is a clear message for all countries in the region who are striving to conduct a sovereign policy and to independently determine their own economic, political, and cultural system. In Washington, they are ready to respect your independence and take your interests into account only if you are willing to tailor them to the interests of the United States and to conduct a policy which is convenient to and beneficial to them. As soon as you attempt to try to benefit your own people, then then you will be treated the same way that Venezuela is being treated. So don't ask for whom the bell tolls. The bell tolls for you. We reaffirm our solidarity with the Venezuelan people as they face the trials before them. We support the policy of the government of Mr. Maduro, which is geared towards the protection of the national interest and sovereignty of the homeland. We believe that all of those for whom international law is not mere noise have an obligation to stand with Venezuela. We note that Caracas has consistently demonstrated a willingness to engage in dialogue, to cooperate with Washington, both in terms of effectively coordinating acts for countering narcotics trafficking, as well as to combat real, not imagined terrorism. By all accounts, support for peaceful means of settling dispute and multilateral cooperation in these areas are something which are being advocated by all countries in the region. And yet, for some reason, for Washington, this is falling on deaf ears, and they are obstinately embracing their policy of destruction, which is fraught with grave consequences for the region and the world as a whole. We regret the fact that the new U.S. administration, which has been sober and pragmatic in its approach when it comes to other crisis situations, when it comes to Venezuela, it remains mired in approaches which itself actively criticizes. We trust that common sense will indeed prevail and that Washington will manage in time to to prevent a fatal error which inevitably will undermine long-term U.S. national interests.
For some time now, under the pretext of combating drug trafficking, the United States have continued to increase its military deployment in the waters of the Caribbean off the coast of Venezuela. It has escalated sanctions, blockades, and military threats against Venezuela, and claimed to have sunk Venezuelan vessels, shot dead crew members, and seized oil tankers. It has designated the Venezuelan government as a foreign terrorist organization, claimed that Venezuela's territory, oil, and assets belong to the United States, and even threatened military strikes against the Venezuelan territory. The U.S. actions and the rhetoric have led to continued tensions in the region, raising serious concerns among regional countries and the international community. As an independent sovereign state, Venezuela has the right to independently develop mutually beneficial cooperation with other countries and defend its legitimate rights and interests, which should be respected and supported by the international community. China opposes all acts of unilateralism and bullying and supports all countries in defending their sovereignty and national dignity. We stand against any move that violates the purposes and principles of the UN Charter and infringes upon other countries' sovereignty and security, against the threat or use of force in international relations, against external interference in Venezuela's internal affairs under any pretext, and against illicit unilateral sanctions and long-arm jurisdiction that have no basis in international law or authorization by the Security Council. We call on the United States to heed the just call of the international community, immediately halt relevant actions, and avoid further escalation of tensions. We urge the United States to uphold the navigation safety of regional countries and the freedom and rights they enjoy under international law, to conduct normal law enforcement and judicial cooperation under bilateral and multilateral legal frameworks, to lift illicit unilateral sanctions, and to do more to promote peace, stability, and development in Latin America and the Caribbean.